Hello and welcome to the MKH Podcast. I am your host, Maximillian Hill, and today we have a very special guest. Jeremy Hazan is a BizOps lead at Hyperbolic, an AI Web3 company based out of San Francisco that just raised $7 million. He's ex-Avalanche, and he's a co-founder of Cornell Blockchain, where I met him last year and got to see Emin Gun Sire give a wonderful keynote speech. Jeremy, thank you for coming on the podcast. How are you?
Great. Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure.
So exciting times at Hyperbolic. I saw the announcement about the fundraise. So tell me, what's going on? What have you been up to, and how's the business going?
Of course, yeah. So thank you for the intro. Basically, as you mentioned, I'm leading business operations at Hyperbolic. Hyperbolic is a company that is specializing in decentralized AI infrastructure with a mission to actually democratize access to AI and solve the problem of GPU shortage. So we are focalizing on three main goals. And I think, a part of those goals is the reason why we got to secure this 7 million seed fundraise. So first one is basically the GPU orchestration layer. So in very simple terms, for those who are unfamiliar with GPUs first, GPU is a graphic processing unit. It has been created in the late 1990s by back then a company that was not very famous called NVIDIA, and was created first to better the performances of graphics in video games. In early 2000s, what happened is that one professor from Stanford actually had a conversation with his son, who's a gamer, and he was talking about the amazing performances of those GPUs that have been built by NVIDIA, and told his dad, who was doing research in machine learning, that if he actually used one of those GPUs, it would accelerate the time of results. That was his thought. So the dad went on to try, and for what he was doing, he was conducting research in healthcare data. And so when he was running back then on a CPU, all of the different, algorithms, he would receive a response in 3 weeks. And actually what happened when he started using the GPU from NVIDIA is that he received the response in a couple of hours. So later on, went on to speak with Jensen, the CEO and co-founder of NVIDIA, and they started realizing that actually this was extremely helpful for machine learning and AI. So basically, going back now to today's world where AI is picking up and everyone is just talking about it and everyone wants to build AI-powered services and products, GPUs are core for that. And so the reality is that if you're a young researcher, if you're an AI, or if you're an AI developer, or even just an AI startup, getting access to those GPUs, because the demand is far outpacing the supply, makes it extremely costly, but almost impossible to grasp your hands on. And we realized at Hyperbolic that there are a lot of data centers and a lot of individuals in the world that actually have compute that is not being used 24/7. In other words, that is being idle. And so because of this, we realized that we could create sort of like an Airbnb for GPUs.
I was just about to say Airbnb, right? Or
Exactly.
even Uber, because you think people's cars, when you drive to a physical workplace, it sits idle,
Yes.
for
Yeah.
hours, thousands of hours.
Exactly.
And when you're working in person, you're home sitting idle for hours is new business models. So keep going.
100%. And so that's what's been happening is we realized that if we actually built a robust, scalable backend architecture, we could actually create this network where anyone who has this idle compute capacity would be able to share it on our network, Hyperbolic, and basically making it accessible for the people who need it the most. So AI developers, researchers, startups, as I was mentioning before. And so this is what we started doing. So going back to what I was telling you, this is like goal number one is this GPU orchestration layer, building this GPU marketplace where it's extremely accessible and easy for anyone to get access to compute in a much more affordable way than like with the big cloud providers. And then on top of this, we're building AI services. So for now, we have inference. We're basically hosting open source AI models like the Llama 3 family family from Meta, and we are making it accessible for developers to actually copy the API and plug it in into their code. So that's basically the core of what we're doing. And then goal number 2 and goal number 3, much more quickly, are around verification, making sure that we can verify and trust actually third-party nodes that are joining the network. And for this, we created our own verification mechanism called proof of sampling. And then part number 3 is privacy. Let's say that a user has some sensitive data that basically doesn't want to be kept on the machine of the third-party node, then we're utilizing what we call trusted executed environments or confidential computing. That is a technology that's already sitting on top of the NVIDIA H100 machines, which is sort of like state-of-the-art machines today in GPUs, and basically making it possible for encrypted data, and basically the third-party node won't be able to get access to the sensitive data of the user.
Very interesting. You mentioned Jensen Huang, the CEO of NVIDIA. Did you get to meet him or connect with him at all?
Oh, I wish, maybe one day. Jensen is sort of like, a hero has been a hero for quite a while for me, specifically because I've been, in AI for quite a while now. And, I've been following a lot of the steps that he was doing way before ChatGPT was released to the world. And when, things got to start very exciting in AI, because he's really at the core of everything that sits on top of like the software that is eating the world, as Mark Anderson would say.
Eating the world is that's a good description.
Exactly. So that's why he's a hero of mine, and I've been following a lot of his steps and moves for the past 10 plus years.
You mentioned heroes. We met at the Roosevelt Island campus of Cornell Blockchain, of which you are a founder, and we got to see the Avalanche CEO, Emin Gunsire, give a keynote talk, and I gotta say, I was so impressed by him, super impressed. So tell me a little bit about your time at Avalanche and about what it was like founding Cornell Blockchain.
Of course. Well, what happened is that I arrived to US because, and this is something we can discuss later, but I'm French, actually. I was born and raised in Paris. And so I moved to the US for my master's at Cornell in 2020. So right in the middle of COVID, which was not the funniest part. And so what happened is that it was a dual master's degree, so 2 years long, between 2020 to 2022. In 2020, obviously, as you can imagine, everything was done, remotely. There were no classes in person. And, it feels frustrating when you're an expat. You're moving to a new country, you're trying to discover a new culture and new people. You're basically isolated and left alone behind your computer. So I pledged that the second year, if we would have classes back in person, I would be extremely involved in the community and the school. And so that's why I decided to create a club. And so I started becoming extremely interested into blockchain in summer of 2018 when I did a summer program at Harvard in cryptography. And I was actually keen on learning more. I knew and I saw that there were some experts on campus, people that were coming from the industry, because Cornell Tech is a post-grad campus only. So you have MBAs and LLMs and PhDs. So you have people who already have had experiences in the professional world before. So, I wanted to get to learn a little bit more about that. And so I co-founded it with a very good friend of mine, Alex Lin, who went on to create his new VC fund today, specializing in Web3. And so while I was, with Alex co-organizing, a lot of events and the second generation of the Cornell Blockchain Conference in 2022, I got to meet with industry leaders and founders of amazing companies, including the founding team of Avalanche. So as I got to meet with them, very early on, there was a very, very strong synergy that was happening between them and myself. And so that is the reason why they've offered me the first role, sort of like, the first APM position in the company. So APM is Associate Product Manager. It's a position that has been created I think at Google, if I'm not mistaken, in 2002, and ever since has become a very important aspect and part of the big tech companies or even startups, because associate product manager roles are usually the ones where you don't have a prior experience working full-time as a software engineer or as an engineer, or as a product manager. You want to get started, and basically you have a 1 to 2 year long program where you're rotating from one product to the other, and then you basically get to become a product manager. So this is what I did at Avalanche. Got to evolve in the product suite on a product called AvaCloud, which was amazing, which is a blockchain as a service kind of product, and went on actually to finalize my time at Avalanche in Japan, because I was foreseeing the importance in terms of revenue that could have been that could be brought into the Japanese market, and so did my time there, and then eventually joined Hyperbolic.
You mentioned candidates who might not have a lot of software engineering experience who still want to break into tech. Now, a lot of my audience are aspiring software engineers, but last year was such a brutally competitive field, I think. And part of the reason for that is because of the advent of remote work. They're no longer competing against just kids in New York City or Silicon Valley or Seattle. They're now competing against anyone with an internet connection. And some of those people will do their job for a fraction of what you need to pay someone in New York City. So, you mentioned that exposure to different products. I think that's a really awesome program that Avalanche had. So what advice would you give to current computer science students that are looking to land that first internship or meaningful entry-level job in tech?
Yeah, that is a great question. Well, it's interesting because what you mentioned is exactly what I believe to be the case and to be extremely relevant today in our market. COVID opened up the doors to the rest of the world, basically, and now rather than competing, as you mentioned, locally speaking, like 50, 60, 70 years ago, you would be, competing with the people who are in your region or your city or your state. It's not the case anymore. You're competing with people all around the world. And as you mentioned, very rightly so, the thing is that there are a lot of countries in the world where the cost of, hiring engineers is way lower, and you will have access to amazing engineers, actually. So it becomes extremely hard. So I think you really need to differentiate yourself. I do believe that there's multiple ways to differentiate yourself. My experience was actually building a club. This was the best, going back and trying to understand from my past, successes and failures. I do believe that this led to the most interesting first off experience for me, because it was an amazing, I was very fortunate to be speaking to amazing industry leaders and people who I would have never thought being able to speak to if I didn't create that. And also it sort of like empowers you in so many different ways, because it's like running sort of like a small startup on campus,
It really is, yeah.
Exactly. So you're getting involved in so many different things. For the conferences, you're looking at fundraising for, with the sponsorships in order to fund, all of the costs that will be associated to organizing the conference, because it's extremely costly. We had over 800 people coming in,
Yeah.
So basically that is, part of what I've been learning, and, just having someone who's going to be a head of research and appointing someone who's going to be, leading marketing and events and things like this. So this was an amazing experience for me. And if this doesn't correspond to the profile of the candidates, that's not a problem. You can actually join a club as being VP of research if that's what you're interested in, or actually VP of marketing if that's what you're interested in, etc. But I do believe that it's important to really differentiate, and differentiating is not happening with the grades. Differentiating is happening with the actions that you're taking to step up outside of the classroom.
Yeah, you mentioned community building, and I think it's such a powerful thing. Whether you're building community, it could be on LinkedIn, right? There's groups. Like I've been invited to groups with like 40,000 people, or if it's an in-person group like Cornell Blockchain on Roosevelt Island. I mean, that event was very well attended, and when I think back to when I was starting out, I was young. I thought I knew everything. And I just thought my work would always speak for itself. And I've learned it's not true. You need to have a network because the best opportunities never make it to a public jobs board of a company. They're usually filled way before it even gets to that point.
Yes.
And the best opportunities never get to public job boards. So I think, yes, that was a great move starting the Cornell blockchain because now you are the connector, right? And that's
Doing.
incredible. And yeah, let's go back to the event. Now, the event at Rizalana was very well attended, and I thought it was super well organized. My friend Arun Prasad was speaking on one of the panels, and someone that he was on the panel with, I forget his name, but he founded a hedge fund based off of digital currencies, one of the first. So he's probably worth like $1 bajillion. And someone asked him a question, what advice would you give to recent college graduates? And the thing that he said was reach out to people like me and don't stop. He's like, until you get a cease and desist letter or something in writing that explicitly says to stop contacting me, it's not harassment. And I laughed because, you know, uh, it's kind of funny, but it's true. I think the point, someone like him, who's millions of people would love to get some time on his calendar, right? He's probably booked for every day for like years out. So he doesn't always have time. So when I speak with my students, I have to say, you have to remember you're trying to get time with people who have severe constraints on their time. So you just have to keep reaching out and you gotta kind of be shameless, right? To like just put yourself out there and if you never hear from them, then that's the way it goes. There's many other opportunities. But yeah, that was the best quote that I remember from that wonderful conference was it's not harassment until you get the cease and desist letter. And I had to laugh. It was great. So many wonderful people. Now, the beautiful thing about New York City is, you know, you can walk around. Like the other day, I was in Central Park and I met a Russian data scientist. I met a Cuban software engineer and a Ukrainian businesswoman, all in 15 minutes, right? Tell me you're an international talent. You mentioned you're from Paris. Tell me about what benefits do you think someone who has an international background, who's been to places like Japan, what advantages and edges does that candidate have?
Yeah, I think it's a great question. So first off, it's exactly, what I felt when I moved to New York. Going back to your points, you really feel like you're in the capital city of the world. It's if I'm not mistaken, also the city that has the biggest amount of languages that are being spoken.
Correct.
And so it's to no surprise that you had this experience and that it's something that's happening on a weekly or if not on a daily basis. So I would say, going back to your question, that being an international student or coming from another country and having experiences in other places. So as I told you, I come from France, but I did move to the US. I lived in Japan as well. I think it brings an amazing edge compared to when you just come from one country and you've lived there your entire life, because you come with another culture. And if you live in another country as well, you're just adding those up, and I don't think it's linear. I think it's exponential, because getting to learn all of those cultures will make you understand much better the way people think in certain parts of the world. And for a lot of things, while you're either an employee or just building a business as an entrepreneur, it's extremely relevant because, you will get to be able, to close a deal much more easily. You will be able to, understand what type of tech or what type of soft skills those people are interested in from other parts of the world. And, giving you just this example of like being French in the US, it's amazing because you get to be exposed while you're arriving in the US to a whole other world with so many people, as you mentioned, that so many different cultures and so many different interesting opportunities that, would have never happened to me if I stayed there, that, you can make the most out of it. You basically don't feel refrained in any ways, and you are able to actually bring, a lot coming from your culture and your country while mixing it up with everything that's happening in the US. So it's a very, very interesting thing.
Yeah, I think the people who have been fortunate enough to travel, have an edge because it really does open your mind, and you're, I think, more open-minded, which I think not just for careers, but in life is
Yeah.
really a good habit to have. I mean, I love my time in Paris. I got to learn a little bit of French, enchanté, nice to meet you. Uh,
Enchanté.
and the other thing, I guess there's a stereotype in America of people in Paris that they're stuck up or something, and I didn't experience that at all. I think maybe it's just a little bit more conservative than America, where people speak freely, more freely. I worked for a massive French company in the past, so all of my bosses were French. Uh,
Wow. Okay.
but I didn't really actually learn any French until I actually got to Paris.
Yeah.
But yeah, many of the students at Lehman College are, international talent, and I tell them all the time, use that edge, right? If you're applying to a company, look up the hiring manager on LinkedIn, see if they speak any languages,
Yeah.
right? Talk to them send them a message in that language, right? Boom. Now you're memorable, right? You mentioned you were in Japan. One of our students, Alex Kizada, he was working on, I think, self-driving cars while he was in Japan. He came out to a networking event with us, and one of the speakers had spent significant time in Japan, right? And then he just walked up to him. I told him, "Konnichiwa," right? And boom, he'll remember that guy, and like half the battle is just being memorable. So,
Exactly.
um, last question for you. Are there any books or podcasts that you've listened to that have had a significant impact on you that you would recommend to any college students or recent graduates?
Yeah, of course. I think there's so many. Maybe starting with podcasts. There's one that I really love, which is called Acquired. It's mainly focusing on tech, but they've been recently doing, podcasts on everything from retail to like luxury. They did like an episode on like LVMH and another one, on Hermes, two amazing French companies. And what they do is that they basically say that every company has a unique story. They dig extremely deeply into that story, and trying to understand how the co-founders came up with the idea, and how the companies that we know today that we are all using or talking about have evolved to where they are. They've actually made 3 episodes on NVIDIA that are like amazing, that I highly recommend if you're a software engineer or like a student in computer science. And yeah, I would say this is like number one that comes to mind. And then for a book, the latest one that I've been, reading is called Built by Tony Fadell, and I could not recommend it more. It's an amazing. It can feel first like a recipe, and you're like, for life and success in your business life. But in reality, it's much more deep and much more complex than this. For those of you who don't know, Tony Fadell is actually the co-inventor of iPod and iPhone at Apple.
Wow.
2 pretty successful products so far.
Wildly successful.
And Tony is actually talking about all of the main steps, in order to succeed in life. So it's basically how to become, an employee, how to become an entrepreneur, how to become a CEO, and all of those steps. And it's actually extremely interesting because he has a very unorthodox way of thinking that will really push you out of your comfort zone and will make you want to grind and just grow and become more cultured and grown up. So yeah.
I love hearing about people like that and listening to them speak. Not because I'm not trying to build the next iPhone, right? Because that battle has already been won, right?
Yeah.
But it's more just getting exposure to how they think, right? And are there any lessons that I can glean from them that can
Yes.
improve my life and career? I'm not going
100%.
to become a billionaire, but anything that will improve it's worth doing. I mean, with so many virtual mentors these days, we should all take advantage of it. So, all right, I think that's all the time that we've got today. But Jeremy, I want to thank you for coming on the MKH podcast. If anyone in my audience would like to connect with you, what's the best way for them to reach out?
Um, I mean, anyone can connect with me on LinkedIn.
Okay.
That's an easy way. Yeah,
We'll
I
just
would say
say I'll tell them, just say Maximilian Hill referred you, and then
exactly. And then it's going to be
get to
much
the top of
easier.
the line of Jeremy's invitation to
Exactly. On
on
the subject
LinkedIn.
line,
So,
just mention that you're coming from Max and everything will be perfect.
very good. Jeremy, want to wish you the best of luck, continued success
Thank
at
you.
Hyperbolic, and looking forward to having you come on the podcast again.
Thank you very much.
All right.